So this may seem a really strange thing to do, and it is strange for me. I'm Trish Mercer. I have written this book series, and for years I have wanted to turn it into an audiobook. However, that takes a lot of time, a lot of effort, and actually a lot of money too. Well, I didn't have any of those. Well, I have effort, but I'm just not going to spend the time because I'm a mom with a big family. I work full-time as a school teacher, and it just was never working. And then about a week and a half ago, I woke up with the weirdest dream. You know, I have those dreams that you wake yourself out of to stop it. And I was actually trying to watch a YouTube video. And I follow a number of podcasters and YouTube video people. And every channel that I went on, instead of me being able to listen to it, it was looking at me as if waiting for me to say something. And I thought, this is the strangest thing. Come on, guys, somebody say something. And everybody was looking at me to say something. So I woke up and I went, what in the world is that supposed to mean? And as I was pondering it and thinking about it, the thought came very clearly to my head. You've always wanted to do audiobooks, but you can't get it perfect. And I kind of like to get things perfect. But you know, a lot of these YouTubers don't have perfect channels. And if you really just want to read your books on YouTube and let people listen to them chapter by chapter, why don't you do that? And I had all kinds of excuses why I shouldn't do that. I'm not going to go into all of them, but eventually I decided, fine, I'm going to do it. And it will be free for me, and it'll be free for people who want to listen. And if they don't want to listen, they don't have to. And I've had over the years probably 7 or 8 people say that they would like to have an audiobook. So my 7 or 8 friends, this is for you. So here I am. I'm going to be doing this definitely not perfectly. You're going to hear all of my stutters and stammers, which I tend to have a bit of a stammer. I'm able to kind of work around it, but sometimes it just pops up and there's no fighting it. So I realize that in my teaching of English in high school, I frequently read books out loud. Just imagine that you were in one of my high school classes and I'm reading my book out loud. See, there's my little stammer. And you're going to hear everything because, frankly, I just don't have the time to edit. And you're getting this for free. And if you don't like it and it's not good enough, you're not out any money. So it works great for all of us. I'm recording this in my walk-in closet. I'm looking at my clothes and seeing how I need to reorganize them. But I'm also going to just focus on doing this, and I'm going to try to read a chapter and upload a chapter as often as I can. So here I am. This is The Forest at the Edge of the World, Book 1 in the Forest at the Edge series, written by Trish Mercer and copyrighted by me. I will also have links to the books down in the comment section or just the little information section there. I give away my books for free because I feel the message that has been given here was given freely to me. The stories were pretty much gifted into my head, okay? As was the inspiration to start doing this. And when I was in the middle of the night of thinking about doing this, I finally said, okay, fine, I'm going to record these books. And then I looked at my clock and it was like 1:30 in the morning. And if you are a good insomniac like I am, there was no getting back to bed that night. But I have since slept. So here we go. I am going to try to do a chapter a day. Well, no, forget that. We know that's not going to happen. I'm going to try to do a chapter each blog entry, video entry. See, I'm already screwing this up. It's okay. All of us are imperfect. We can do that. And we'll just see how it goes. All right. So I will also have the book right along with you. So if you want to read it, because you don't need to be looking at me. All right. Prologue, Book 1. Words for Weeds. So, you really destroyed the world? The old woman kneeling in the pumpkin patch sat back on her heels and looked up at her accuser. The sunlight illuminated his worried look, betraying his attempt at nonchalance. The woman smirked. 13-year-olds weren't known for their subtlety. She tucked a wisp of gray hair behind her ear. Not exactly. But the look in the boy's eyes suggested he didn't believe her. She'd seen this happen before with other 13-year-olds. He was now ready for the knowledge, and for many moons he would struggle to regard her as he used to, because the old woman he thought he knew turned today into something much more. There had always been stories, but today he heard the story. The old woman noticed movement behind the boy. His cousin was picking her way through the pumpkins, wearing the same anxious, stunned look. She was 13, too. "Now I understand why you didn't teach the lesson," she said when she reached them. The girl warily eyed the small woman. "So, Mugga, is it all true?" Mugga positioned herself more comfortably in the dirt. That was why she wore her brown cotton skirt and tunic, and put her hands on her hips. Depends on who told the story this time. "We were told that you are," the girl swallowed nervously before continuing, "the most dangerous woman in the world?" Mugga rolled her eyes dramatically. "Let me guess, a certain general told you that?" Her voice dripped contempt. The children nodded and, for the first time, began to relax. "You know how he likes to weave a story," she reminded them. Finally, the cousins smiled. Mugga was still as they remembered her. "Sort of. I can give you the real story, the more accurate version." She winked at them. They grinned. "That's what we were hoping," the boy said, sounding relieved. But I have so much weeding to do," Mugga sighed sadly. "So much work." The cousins exchanged a knowing glance and then dropped to their knees. Their mothers had purposely sent them out in their work clothes. "Words for weeds?" the girl asked. Mugga nodded. "Words for weeds, Heisey. And Vid, it wasn't exactly destroyed. The world's still there, right?" The boy shrugged. "I don't know, Mugga. Is it?" She gestured to the garden. The children immediately started pulling unwanted vines and yellow flowers. Mugga smiled and leaned back to let the sun beat down upon her. The afternoon was going to be easy, just as she expected. "Now, we'll begin with Orin in the year 317. I always like to start with an end because that's the way to get to a beginning." Chapter 1. The chicken thing was just a misunderstanding. It was his last day. For any other person, that would have explained the lost-in-thought expression on his face as he sat alone in the quiet hall. But the thickest ruler of the world had only ever been lost. He gave other people slips of gold to do the thought part for him. He also didn't know it was his last day. But that was about to change. "King Orin!" shouted the voice across the empty throne room. The middle-aged king looked up from his golden leather throne. He saw the old professor, white-haired and squatty, entering into the long hall filled with windows. He had a way perpetually trembling, Orin had noticed some time ago, which made his tufty hair quiver like an agitated skunk. Orin always liked skunks. The afternoon sun illuminated the other professors that Orin employed as his advisors, as well as the High General and about a dozen soldiers in blue woolen uniforms who followed. Orin didn't like the High General. Everything about him was too hard and gray, like a rock come to life, and it wasn't happy about it. Orin gulped. "We are all here this day," the professor gestured to those behind him, "to deliver our judgment and punishment on the 47th day of planting, the year 317. "I know what day it is," King Orin offered helpfully. "To announce to you that—" "What?" the old professor squinted. "The date? You don't need to tell me anymore. I figured out how to read calendars a few years ago, remember?" "Did you hear that?" the professor announced to the men behind him. 44 years old, and Orin now knows how to tell the date. "Right after I hired you, we spent several days going over the dating system," Orin continued, not recognizing the sarcasm in his advisor's voice. But Orin did realize that Professor Mal was trembling even more than usual. He usually did that just before he started yelling. "We have 4 seasons, 91 days in each, and each year starts again in planting season, although I always thought it was the middle of raining, but—" The professor, incredulous, turned to the High General. "Do you still insist that he deserves my carefully prepared speech? Listen to him babbling." "It does make more sense for the year to begin in planting, since dogs—" The High General, a hulking man in his 50s, sighed loudly. "Nico, we went over this." "Although I'm sure the cats disagree," Orin scratched his chin and lost his thought. The High General's gravelly voice always made him forget what he was talking about. It was cats, Orin suddenly remembered. He liked cats, not skunks. Simple mistake. Both are the same size, same shape, just different coloring. It was easy to confuse a skunk for his cat lost in the mansion's compound at night, but do it 4 times and the servants began to complain. King Orin deserves to know why this judgment is being handed down to him. The High General's face tightened as the king raised his hand to say something. What happened to my cat? Mal, I haven't seen her around for... Orin, Professor Mal bellowed, his white hair shaking. Shut up! The king of the world clamped shut his mouth and cowered on his throne. Mal never did like his cat. Or maybe it was the skunk he didn't like. The smell, Orin, don't you notice the smell? Mal had yelled that at him once when he wrestled the skittish, terrified cat into the mansion, only to realize he had the wrong animal. It was the smell of worry, Orin had thought. He knew that smell intimately. Surely his cat would feel worried too. Mal straightened his woolen jacket. We are here to explain to you why you will no longer be ruling our world nor occupying that chair. This has to do with the market last week, right? Orin squeaked, beginning to make his own scent of worry. The silk cloak? Among other things, yes. Because I have that figured out now, Orin said, trying to avoid the steady glare of the High General. Normally, he enjoyed looking at all the shining metals, counting the stitched patches on his blue uniform, and admiring the silver work on the hilt of his sword. But today, the High General of Idamia's army had an even harsher expression, which refused to let Orin focus on his uniform. You see, Orin started, you explained to me that even though I possess the world, that's only what your grandmother claimed, Mal reminded him. Orin kept going, because Mal always said that and he didn't know why. I just can't take from it what I want. People get mad when I raise taxes so that I can make my mansion lovelier, but I can't get more things if I don't have more slips of gold or silver, and I have to take those things from the people. So when I took that silk cloak last week, I didn't give any slips of gold because I didn't have any, and I didn't want to take any. Instead of taking gold that's mine but being held by the people, I just took the cloak. He smiled proudly. It had taken him all night to work that out, but finally he got it. And without any of his advisors' help. He never followed what they said anyway. Mal closed his eyes. High General, do we really have to continue this? He's a waste of my breath. Nico, tell the man. This will be put on the message boards, remember? He said out of the corner of his mouth. You know full well that how history is recorded is how it's understood. The world needs to understand this in the right way. Orin overheard his low muttering, but just didn't worry about it. Life was so much easier when he stopped worrying about the bits that make no sense. The High General glanced over at the nervous scribe in the corner who was trying to read his lips. The man immediately hunched back over the stack of parchment on his small desk and returned to his scrawling. Mal grudgingly opened his eyes. Your theft in the marketplace caused a riot, he resumed his explanation to Orin. Remember us telling you about that? Orin nodded slowly. It had seemed to be a rather good party. And that riot spread to nearly each of the 17 villages surrounding Idamia. We've been hearing reports of death and chaos, and the army has been dispatched to quell the riots in villages where we didn't even need forts before. The world has been devastated by your ineptitude. Orin silently mouthed ineptitude. Mal liked big words. Orin didn't. The scribe hurriedly dipped his quill in the ink and scribbled on the parchment. Mal cleared his throat and resumed his speech. Since your ancestor Quirrell the First took control of our world in 190, he didn't stop the chaos but added to it. Starting in 195, we suffered from the Great War for 5 long years. 200,000 were dead at the end of it. Oh, another lecture, thought Orin glumly. How many lectures had he sat through, bored to squirming because Mal said he needed an education? He'd done school, lots of it. It was all the same. Words, writing, reading, staring out the window, waiting for something interesting to happen. As a boy, he'd look at a piece of chalk and wish it could turn into a stick or something. Maybe that wasn't too interesting, but maybe 2 sticks. Orin! The king blinked and sat up straighter to face the snarling voice that said his name. Mal had his arms folded, his hair so jittery that Orin knew the explosion of temper was coming at any moment. He gritted his teeth and braced himself. Yes? Where are you? The king blinked twice at that. He looked around and considered that maybe Mal had been wrong to yell at him for years about being stupid. Clearly, Mal was the one struggling right now. We're in the throne room, Orrin said kindly. Mal was an old man after all. Orrin! Yes? Pay attention, Mal bellowed. Orrin jumped in his throne and nodded. That was the only way to calm Mal. Silent obedience. Professor Mal cleared his throat, shot a furious look at the High General, who ignored him, and continued on the same dull lecture. The violent faction who prolonged the war, the Garters, were carelessly allowed by Quirrell I to escape their punishments by fleeing to the dangerous forests beyond our borders. We weren't saved from them. They still attack us and steal our goods. Orrin knew better than to sigh loudly. His grandmother's slap always reminded him that she never approved of that, and neither did Mal. Sighs always made the old professor shake more, and right now he was quivering as if he stood on his own land tremor. All Orrin could do was focus on the brass buttons on the High General's uniform and wonder what they'd look like hanging in the windows where they could catch the sun's light. Maybe his cat would come back if he saw them shining. Quirrell didn't bring peace, Mal droned on, neither did his son Quirrell II, a brutal and paranoid king who employed 20% of the population to spy on the other, looking for evidence of Garter collaboration and bringing the need for execution squads. Under his rule, another 12,000 perished, according to our best guesses. Many of them simply vanished. Too many big words, but something Mal said. Orrin's thoughts shifted away from wondering if skunks like shiny things, and he looked into Mal's enraged eyes. Maybe he should pay attention. His son, Quirrell III, was no better, continuing the reign of terror of his father, and his wife, your grandmother, Orrin, was the most evil woman to ever stalk this world. Since she died 7 years ago, we've done all we can to undo her influence upon the world and you. She wasn't that bad, Orrin feebly tried to defend her. He couldn't help it. Even though she'd been gone for years, somehow she was still in his mind, pinched lip and pointing. That finger was gnarled and bony, but somehow it was still the scariest finger in the world, and you couldn't turn your back on it, or it'd get you. She disposed of your wife and two daughters, Orrin, Mal shouted. Do you know what happened to them? That was one of those worrying things Orrin found it easier to just not worry about. He timidly shook his head. Never bothered to ask, did you? Your wife couldn't produce a son, and you can't legally have more than 2 children. So your grandmother cleared the way for you to have more children by various women in the world in order to finally produce a male. And what about your own mother, Orrin? What happened to her? Another worrying thing. Mal seemed strangely interested in those today. Orrin began, although his grandmother always smacked him whenever he began a sentence so inarticulately. They went for a walk. She just disappeared. Just disappeared, Mal repeated tonelessly. The wife of the king, out walking with her mother-in-law in a city of tens of thousands, and she just disappears? I know you believed that as a boy, but still, Orrin, no one would have ever accused your grandmother of kindness. She didn't want anyone else to influence her 2 grandsons but her. Orrin's mouth dropped open, but he absently rubbed his face where she hit him every day for the 37 years she ruled his life. No, she was mean, certainly, but not. She'd never have. Then your father, Quirrell IV, what an idiot. Not as big as you, granted, Mal conceded, but the chicken thing was just a misunderstanding, Orrin insisted. Here was something he did know. He didn't want the pox to... The chickens were never infested with pox, Orrin, Mal barked. And any other thinking man would have asked for a second opinion instead of taking the word of cattle ranchers that the chickens were ill and advancing disease. Any other man would have asked a scientist before killing off 90% of the world's poultry. It took the world years to recover from your father's gullibility. Orrin bit his lip. Without even knowing what all of those words were, he was beginning to suspect things weren't going his way. And then there's you, Mal spat. I've been tutoring you for years, but to no avail. Perhaps if your older brother Quirrell V hadn't died as a teen, the world may have been a better state today, but I doubt it. He was more closely knitted to your grandmother and her love of execution squads than you are. I suppose we have that to be grateful for, he added. But the world is tired, Orrin, tired of your family, tired of your abuses, tired of your stupidity. They could take naps, Orrin offered lamely. nothing else coming to mind. When they're tired, I do. Every afternoon. Mal exhaled oddly. Nearly half of our history has been dictated by your family, but no more. By nightfall, the world will find itself governed by a body of 23 experienced and wise professors from the University of Idemia. Tomorrow, the future of the world will be brighter because there'll be no more quarrels or Orins in it. What do you mean? Now it was Orin's turn to tremble. Now he was sure this wasn't going well. Not at all. The scribe scribbled so frantically that flecks of ink splattered around his desk. King Orin, today we are charging you with gross negligence and complete indifference toward the 1 million people of the world you have pledged to rule. You've done nothing to alleviate suffering, but instead increased it. You've not shielded your people from death, but brought more to them. You've not listened to their cries for help, but ignored them. We have not progressed under your rule, but have stagnated. Orin wondered when he'd done any of that. He couldn't remember doing anything but staying in the mansion and doing what kings do, although he'd always been a bit vague as to what exactly that was. I am here to inform you that you are not fit to lead this world, Mal announced, and that in your stead will be placed a body of administrators and a chairman who will govern and protect this world in the way it was meant to be ruled, supported by the army of Idemia. We will be here for the people. Orin, if you believe in a creator, now would be the time to begin a conversation with him. Orin's tongue went limp, and he watched the soldiers come around from behind the High General. He made a slight motion with his hand, and Orin could do nothing but watch the soldiers draw their swords. The scraping of the metal had always seemed to him a rather pretty noise, but today it seemed to scratch the inside of his ears. 10 men. There was a lot he knew he didn't know. It was as if the rest of the world had an edge up on him. Maybe they had extra eyes because they always saw more than him, additional ears to hear things he never picked up, and maybe even more in the head. Mal always shouted at him, "Use your brains, Orin," and that worried him. He knew he had a brain, so did others have more than one? But there was one thing Orin did understand, the number of men in an execution squad. They used to be called killing squads in his grandparents' day. The name change was supposed to make people feel better. As he stared at the 10 approaching blades, he realized the change wasn't helping. He hoped his cat would be all right, and the skunk. A few moments later, Professor Mal, now chairman of the administrators, Nico Mal, smiled grimly as the body of their dead king slumped in his throne. 10 sword blades thrust simultaneously was humanely efficient. Well, the High General tilted his head. That was simple. Mal nodded in satisfaction. Yes, all of this was far simpler than I ever imagined. Could portend of good things, he muttered to himself, or it could all prove to be disappointingly easy. The High General glanced briefly at Mal's unusual musings before gesturing to a waiting servant at the side entrance. Call in someone to clean up this mess. Then you and the others may have whatever you can carry from King Orin's private rooms as agreed. But make sure that silk cloak you took is brought to me the moment it's found. Chairman Mal will be presenting it to the surviving family of that dead silk seller when he announces the change in government this evening. You, he pointed to the scribe, who had momentarily forgotten his duty and was staring at the growing pool of blood. He paled as he looked into the terrible expression of the High General. You will show me that record before it goes out to the copiers. I want to verify every word. The scribe whimpered his response, and the servant dashed off to find the cloak. Chairman Mal nodded. Excellent, High General. I suppose that's why I'm keeping you on. The High General scoffed, as if any of this would have happened without my help. Mal smiled thinly. And why you'll also keep that mansion. You've taken care of his former friends? The general asked, one eyebrow arched. Only the 2 sons of that mistress had any possible claim. And since they were never legitimately his, the claim is weak. So weak that a couple of bags of gold quashed it completely. She left that mansion for good years ago, and neither she nor her sons will be coming back to take it from you. The way seems to be wide open, Nico, the general said plainly, with only 1 man's blood shed. Indeed, quite efficient. Mal looked around the throne room. This is too ostentatious for a gathering room, wouldn't you say? The High General didn't even glance at it. Perhaps better suited as an eating hall or a library, Mal whispered, his smile growing. I own nearly every book ever created in the world, and my personal writings, there's enough room here for those and more. The High General sniffed. Books? Thinking? This room won't know how to react to such behavior. Never saw it before. Chairman Mao's grin chilled the throne room. There are going to be all kinds of changes and progress made now, High General. The world will hardly know what to do with it all. The High General looked askance at his new ruler, but said nothing. Mao turned slightly to a slender older sergeant, formerly the head of the King's Guard, who watched from a shadowed alcove. The sergeant nodded almost imperceptibly back. Stage 1 had begun. End of chapter 1. Here's some music. Doodle-doo-doo-doo. All right. Thank you, guys. I expect to see 7 or 8 people have listened to this in the next few weeks, and I will try to get the next chapters up soon. Thank you.